Okay, good afternoon. I don't know if we have to introduce ourselves. My name is Groner, here in Melbourne, Australia. And my dear Chava, Rav Lipskier, who is well known because he is one of the Magidei Shir of the weekly Likutei Sichas project. And so we are going to discuss a little bit the taktsir, what we have of Parshas Vayakhel Tovshin Nun Beis. Maybe refer a little bit also to the Hanachas Atmim Bilti Muga. So Rabbi Lipskier, I'm sure you're aware of the history behind the Hagah of the taktsir. For those who don't know, the Seder was on Mitzvah Shabbos, right after Shabbos. So somebody wrote up taktsir, which is a synopsis in English of the Sicha, of the Farbrengen of Shabbos, and it was sent into the Rebbe. And overnight, they made a Teichen Kotzer, I think it was called, right? A Rad, the Teichen Kotzer. And then later on, they gave in the Rebbe the Sicha of the whole Farbrengen, which the Rebbe was Magia, from which we have the Sefer Sichas of Nun Aleph Nun Beis. It goes back even before also. But the Sichas of Nun Aleph Nun Beis are the Sichas which the Rebbe spoke very strongly since Chav Zayin Oder, since Chav Ches Nissen, till Chav Zayin Oder Nun Beis, Chav Ches Nissen Nun Aleph, till Chav Zayin Oder Nun Beis. The Rebbe spoke very, very strongly about the Inyanim from Mashiach, Geulah, etc. So the story was that on Mitzvah Shabbos, Parshas Vayakhel, so they gave him the taktsir, and Shloike derech haragil, the Rebbe was Magia of the Sicha and the taktsir, and I believe the Rebbe then said it should be resent out again. It used to be then fax the Sicha, right? And sent out again. And then we know that was Chafei Oder, and then Monday was Chaf Zayin Oder Rishon Tovshin Nun Beis. I'd just like to, so he see clearly that the Rebbe knew exactly what's happening. Okay, Yadua, how many times the Rebbe brings it, also Sichas, and from Rabbi saying in the Siena, as when the Eibush does something with a tzaddik, Frat Anosi, it's only Basko Mosai. Just an interesting point that I want to make mention of, which I found out, this was after Gimel Tammuz, that it's known that the publication, the Yiddish Heim, which also had an English section, the Jewish Home, so the Rebbe wanted that, the Rebbe wanted that Lubavitch publications should be checked over by somebody with Achrayis. The Rebbe told it to my father also once. So Lubavitch gives out something, has to be with Achrayis. And so the English section of the Yiddish Heim, the Rebbe took on himself to be Magia. And I once asked somebody who knows, when did the Rebbe start and for how long? So I was told that from the very first edition, the Rebbe was Magia every single English article of the Yiddish Heim, the Jewish Home section. And the last edition that they gave in before Chav Zayin Oder, the Rebbe checked over two articles. I think they were both in Mashiach Geulah too. And the Rebbe sent it out and said something like that, Mikana Lahaba, they should find somebody else to check. If he said Einas Man Grom Mashu, that he won't have time, and they should find somebody else to check it over. This was sometime before Chav Zayin Oder. So it's clear that the Rebbe knew exactly what was happening, and so therefore we see what happened on Mitzvah Shabbos Parshas Vayakhel Tovshin Nun Beis. So would you agree, Rabbi Lipskier, that this taktsir, which is the last thing that we have, Le'eis Ata Mugi from the Rebbe, is Yisod in the Avodah to direct us on how to bring about this galus of the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach?
Absolutely, Rabbi Groner. And what's interesting to point out also is, as you mentioned, that the Rebbe would edit that, during those years, the Rebbe would edit the full Farbrengen every single week, from which we have the Sfarim, the Sefer HaSichas, as you mentioned. But those Sichas would have only come out later in the week. Usually came out somewhere around Wednesday or something like that. And as you said, it was totally unusual that the Rebbe should be Magia anything else of the Sicha. So punkt that week, when B'Poel Mamish the Rebbe was not Magia, the Sicha of that Shabbos, because of Chazayin Adar on Monday, and punkt that time, the Rebbe did leave us and give us this Sicha at least, that we do have a Muga, the Taktsir, the short synopsis of the Sicha, which is quite unbelievable. The Rebbe himself showing us that he knows exactly what's happening and giving us the Sicha as well.
Indeed. Rabbi Lipskier, can you give a taktsir from the taktsir?
Taktsir from the taktsir.
Like you also do for the Likutei Sichas project, you also give a taktsir of the whole Sicha.
Okay, so maybe just to mention the general highlights of the Sicha. Everyone should really learn the Sicha. Every Sicha should be learned in its totality, but this is a very short Sicha, just about a page and a half. But the Rebbe in this Sicha is focusing on the fact that that year was Parshas Vayakhel, as we're in Parshas Vayakhel right now, but that year was also Parshas Shkolim, because that was a leap year. It was an Adar Aleph. It was 2 Adar, so this was the end of Adar Aleph, Shabbos Mevorchim Adar Sheni. And the Rebbe was focusing on the meaning of the word Vayakhel. The Rebbe was explaining how sometimes Vayakhel and Pekudei come together, but we also have Vayakhel separately. And the Rebbe says, we know that Ani Nevreisi L'Shamash Eskoini, the only reason we are here is to serve Hashem. But within the service of Hashem, we could also have different methods and different ways or different what we're focused on. The Rebbe spoke about the idea of Pekudei, really focuses on the individual, each person's individual avodah, and how he is one little part of the bigger puzzle, and each person what a specific function is. But what Vayakhel focuses on is the achdus of everyone, how we're all here, really, the one nekudah that we all share in common, we're all here to serve Hashem. And that one nekudah is shared by every single thing in the world, first of all, but Alachas Kama V'Kama certainly regards to Yidden. And therefore, the focus of this Farbrengen very, very much was the idea of achdus, of revealing what is that shared common denominator that we all have together. We're all here for one purpose and for one reason. And the Rebbe connected the same idea also with the concept of Machzis HaShekel, because as the Rebbe explains, that Machzis HaShekel represents, the Torah originally says that a shekel is made up of 20 geira, and yet we're being told to give half of shekel, rather than just being told to give 10 geira. And the message over here is that every single Yid needs to be united with another Yid in order to be able to become one whole. And the Rebbe strongly spoke in this Farbrengen about this idea of absolute achdus between Yidden, how every Yid needs to love another Yid, as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, and how the Rabbeim taught even a Yid that we never met. And the Rebbe says that even if we need to sometimes negate something in a person's avodah, we need to do it b'darkei noyam, b'darkei shalom, in pleasant ways. And the Rebbe says it works better. It also works better when you try to deal with people in that way. So there's more to the Sicha.
I noticed in the,
right. So there's more to the Sicha we might discuss soon. But when we're speaking about if this is the last Sicha that we have so far from the Rebbe, and it's supposed to be teaching us and telling us our way ahead during this time, during this big Helam V'Hester. So I think so far we have already 2 major points. Number one is that we always have to remain focused on the one nekuda. We're all here for the same purpose. And it's Aninu Vreisi L'Shamash Eskoini, or in the Rebbe's language from Tafshin and Aleph, Tafshin and Beis, what that really means is we're all here for that one nekuda of Lahavi Limoisa Mashiach, although the Rebbe doesn't use those terms exactly in the Sicha, but we're all here for that one purpose, to bring Elikus into this world. And the way to go about it is with absolute achdus. So this obviously is telling us how to go ahead during this time. We must be focused on this Klal Gadol B'Torah that's always a big Yisoid in Chassidus and in the Rebbe's Torah.
Yes, and then the Rebbe says also that this starts with Achdus, with the Eibishter, that the Eser Geira, the Sora Mamoris, and the Eser Kirchas HaNefesh, that a Yid is also half and the Eibishter is the other half. So it has to be the Yisachdus with the Eibishter. I think the Haschole is Yisachdus with the Eibishter. Right? Just first of all, so l'cha'ira, I mean, tzadikim daimim lebeiram, and this is achdus with Davish. There is l'cha'ira also dini from the skashus zum Rebbe. The skashus zum Rebbe is the Rebbe says in the Sicha that wie es steht in Tanya that every Yid is nefesh chelik lekam mimal mamish. And etzem keshat tefes b'mitzosiat it's tefes b'kuloi. So every Yid is like ganz klal Yisrael, but it starts with Achdus with the Eibush, which was also mentioned. So I'm saying Skashus Rebbe is also mentioned back in Perik Beis of Tanya, which talks about the union of the Nefesh Hashem. It's just interesting to note that we just had put him, and very often listen and put him to the Sicha, which the Rebbe said, put him Tovshin Tezayin, very strong Sicha, but they gave the union of Ton Karev Zayin Noch HaYidin. It was a very, very gehebene Verbringen, put him Tovshin Tezayin. And there the Rebbe said also that 1 year, some person thinks you have to go to a place where there's only a few Yidden. 1 year, there's Etzem Katet Tevis Miksosa Tevi Kule. It's a ganz klar Yisrael. It shouldn't be beneath you to go out to a place where there are only a few Yidden. This is also very much the call of the Rebbe. It's again in Katzvei Tevel. I think the Lashon here, it says Katzvei Tevel. Right. But when they gave the union from a way forward, Achdus Yisrael, we know that from, of course, many teachings of the Rebbe, Befrat in the union from Inyan Mashiach. So it was Cheshvan Tovshin Nun Hey here in Australia, and we brought down Rabbi Heschel Greenberg, who's Neida Mefursim in Bechlal, in his Harbatzes Atera, Divrei Chassidus, and in Inyan Mashiach Geulah. He wrote before a whole booklet on teaching about Mashiach, and he gave here a brilliant lecture, and to be Mechazik and Me'oide the Olam, Mamish in a way of Avos Yisrael and Beifen Shel Chiba, as the Rebbe says in the Hanocha, and Shlilas Ha'inyan from Musa, and saying it's after Gimel Tammuz, so it's a difficult time. But he said, he said, if it's not Avos Yisrael, it's not Mashiach Geulah. It's such an important nekuda, and I think this is what the Rebbe saying here, is that it has to be Avos Yisrael, and if it's not Avos Yisrael, it's Nishkin Mashiach Geulah. Continue, Rabbi.
Absolutely. The Rebbe connects this idea that what you were speaking about, how a Yid is so ba'achdus with the Eibishter. The Rebbe says that this is also why we start our day. The Rebbe says we start Moida Ani Lefanecha. As soon as you wake up from your sleep, the first thing you're feeling is that you're absolutely, completely connected to the Eibishter. Ani Lefanecha, says the Rebbe, that doesn't even have to, you say that second, because that a Yid and Hashem are all one. That's an obvious, that's a given from the first second you wake up. We start off with the Avodah. As soon as you're Briya Chadash, you're automatically one with the Eibishter. And the Rebbe adds an interesting word, which I think, again, perhaps, is connected to the Tkufa that we're in right now, because the Rebbe says, when we speak about waking up from your sleep, the Rebbe says, also like the Rambam says, of those people that are asleep, Bahavle Hazman, and all of the Narishkeit and all the vanities of what are going on, we need to wake up from our spiritual sleep. So, perhaps that's also a message during this time where we are in a big Helam Vehester, but at the same time we need to remember that during this Helam Vehester we're be'etzem always, absolutely always, one with the Eibishter and one with the Rebbe, and this hiskashrus is an absolute one in every single second. And this goes back to the same idea of machzis, that Vayakhel, the Eibishter and us, each one a machzis, and only together do we make up one whole. The Rebbe actually continues from there with a Hirah practically from Machzas HaShekel about giving tzedakah. And very interesting, the Rebbe speaks about different dargos of giving tzedakah. The Rebbe says there's Meiser, there's Chomesh, and then there's Koil Asher Le'ish Yitin Ba'ad Nafshay, which the Rebbe mentions a couple of times in Tanya, that, when it's coming to something that's a matter, your life is dependent on it, you would give everything away. Which again, possibly a big rem is coming over here right before Chav Zayin Adar, just before such a time of Helam Vehester where we don't see the Rebbe, and the Rebbe is saying that we need to do mamish, koil asher leish yitin ba'ad nafshe, we need to give of ourselves completely, in every single way, to do everything, that we shouldn't have this current situation of how the Golus is going on.
There's no question that in those years, especially even from before when dollars started, but the Rebbe taught us how to give tzedakah.
Absolutely.
In a way, mamish, Bli Agbolas, totally incomparable to previous years.
You remind me of a Sicha I saw one time, where the Rebbe was, I think it's in Tavshan Lamates, I can't remember right now which Sicha it is, but a very Geshmaka Sicha, where the Rebbe is explaining the difference between Mamali Kolalman and Soiviv Kolalman. And the Rebbe gives the following example. The Rebbe says Mamali Kolalman would be like you give someone a check for tzedakah, but the check is filled in. So it's already a certain amount, Bahagabola. Soiviv Kolalman, the Rebbe gave the dugma of giving a blank check. And that's Taka the Pshat going without any Hagbolas, because you have no idea what the person's going to write. It might Taka be much more than you even have in the bank account. The Rebbe says that's Pshat going out of all Hagbolas completely.
You find that Sicha, please.
That is Hashem. And the Rebbe continues from there, just as the last point, when the Rebbe is speaking about this idea of giving tzedakah, the Rebbe says another lesson, the Machzas HaShekel went for Karbonos. Regarding Karbonis, we know what the Alter Rebbe says. Karbonis starts with ourselves. Odom ki yakrev mikem Karban laHashem. The Karban has to start with ourselves. We give ourselves over to the Eibishter. And giving ourselves over to the Eibishter means every single part of us. So here comes back the same Nakuda again, of really investing every part of ourselves into the Avodah. In this context, the Rebbe is speaking about tzedakah, that you're not only doing the acts of tzedakah, but you're thinking about it, you're speaking about it, you're kol kuloi into it. And again, if we l'cha'ira apply it to the main shlichus that the Rebbe gives us, which is the shlichus of bringing the Geulah, taken from Yad Mamish, through tzedakah, the tzedakah shemakareves Geulah. So again, we have to be involved with it, Mamish, and with every single part of our being. Machshava dibur u'mai, says the Rebbe in another Sicha, famous Sicha Pinchas of Tafshan Aleph, the Rebbe is meirich on this idea, how every part of the Yid has to be involved in the Avodah.
This reminds me of the Maimer, Haboim Yashrish Yaakov Tafshin Memches, where Mamish at the end, the Rebbe talks about the Indian von Machshava Tov and Tracht gut wird sein gut. And because the Rebbe starts off the Maimer, Haboim Yashrish Yaakov, and the Tzemach Tzedek quotes the Targum Mirish in Ben Uzziel, das geht auf das Man Geulah, even though that is talking about also the Avodah b'Zman Hazeh, the Indian from Torah Mitzvahs. And towards the end, the Rebbe says, why did the Tzemach Tzedek start with an Indian from Geulah? Right? So das ist the Indian from Tracht gut.
Wow.
Tracht gut, as a Rätsche, and es ist nicht nur Trachten, but it comes with Dibur, and then it comes the Meise as a Vayakhel von Torah. That means he brings down that this biur, that Haboim Yashish Yaakov is the Indian from B'Zman Geulah, and the Rebbe talks about nicht nur Machshava, also mir tracht gut, nicht nur mir red wegen gut, no, es kommt up in Torah, das ist the Meise. Look up the end of the Maim over there. Wow, and I thought that is also connected, that's what the Rebbe gesagt, as a derech ha'yishora, right? So bringing Mashiach is to learn in Yom Mashiach Geulah, which is of course with them Lepman Mashiach dik, but also it could be es ist nur Machshava, and es ist Dibur, was we learned in Torah, just this is a Machshava ahead, because I looked at that Maimah recently.
Right, so if you mention about a taktir of the taktir, the bottom line of the Sicha is that we have to have absolute Avas Yisrael and Achdus Yisrael. And if we go back also to another one of the Sichas of that Kufam Tafshan and Aleph, I think it was the Sicha of Balak, where the Rebbe says that although Avas Yisrael was always the focus to bring the Geulah, but now since we've accomplished everything already, Avas and Achdus Yisrael now takes on a whole new meaning, that it's the way we have to start living Geuladik. Matas maybe, right? So the Rebbe says we have to start living Geuladik, that we're living already with the times of the Geulah, where obviously we're all going to be betachlis and therefore the only thing that's right now, even though
in the Hanocha, I saw the Hanocha, the Rebbe mentions the Vatal Sibas Agolus, right? But that was the Rebbe said that Leben Mashiach means that we lebt in Anoif and that there's no machlekes.
Exactly.
Right? Which is the challenge. And I'm just reiterating again, as Chas v'Sholem, as the Indian from Lenin, Mashiach, Geulah, Vayakhel, and all these inyanim, should be an Indian of Hepech, Avos Yisrael, and Vayakhel. I just want to also mention, because,
Because I think just 1 second, if I go back again just to the beginning of the Sicha, I think the Rebbe gives us the way. If we remember the Vayakhel point, that we're all here for the same point. Every chassid, every yid knows the tachlis of everything is to bring about Mashiach right now. If we always remember that we're focused on the same thing, we'll have a lot less problems.
Right. And the Rebbe in the Hanocha says Vayakhel Moshe Geulah Rishon Hu Geulah Achron. So I just want to make there's always discussion to mention the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach and the Zehus HaMashiach, which in the course of the past years has become more mefursim and easier. There's Sfarim which have been written about it. V'chulu. Just an interesting Indian that when the Rebbe started to speak again after Chof Ches Nissen, very, very strongly about, and that's when the Rebbe said the Shabbos after that was Tazri Mitzvah Dachzech. We should learn in Yonim. Right after Chof Ches Nissen was Tazri Mitzvah Dachzech.
Tazri Mitzvah was 1 week later.
1 week later. Okay, so in the Tazri Mitzvah Sicha, if you learn. You see over there, first of all, the Rebbe is the one who starts off with you do that in every door there is somebody who is Ro'u Elias Mashiach, and then the Rebbe quotes the Gemara from Sanhedrin, the Veishila Yomru, Shila Shmei, the Veyana Yina Shmei V'chulu the Psukim, and the Rebbe says Ameridik Chiddush, which a lot of people are not aware of because I repeated it recently, and somebody who is a great Talmud Chacham and Ken the Sichas, he says he never realized it. The Rebbe over there says, that's right, when it says that Rashi says, Kol echad hoye deirish achar shmoi. That's what Rashi says. And Bechlal man gelernt, I think even some Sicha the Rebbe sort of learned like that also years ago, that the Talmidim were deirish the shmoi shel Rabbam als Mashiach. The Rebbe there says, V'loi, quoting Rashi, Kol echad hoye deirish achar shmoi, V'loi sheha Talmidim chitshu sheshmoi kishem Rabbi. That it was they themselves. So a Meridike Chiddush, you can look it up over there. It's Meridike Chiddush, the Pshat and Rashi. But the Rebbe was the one who introduced talking about it, and they say that when they sent in the Sicha, they wrote, the Rebbe says, "V'anan chsidim nana basrei," right? So it says in the Ha'ara there, Yosef Yitzchak Shmei. They put in Lechatchila Menachem Shmei, but later on we see how it came many times. The Rebbe in the Ha'aretz, and Rebbe saying Menachem Shmei v'chulu. At that time, here in Australia, when we had various sifas had to go about in Yoni Mashiach Geulah, my father told a story. Father told the story that in the times of the Friedrich Rebbe Tafshin Gimel, Alte Legula, Alte Lechuva, Alte Legula, so in the Stiebel in Brownsville, where my father grew up, the Reim Bahuvim Stiebel, not the one on Carroll Street. Right, so they were there, discussing about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, was making this whole Talmud when they gave Mashiach, and so one says, "Rebald with the Lubavitcher Rebbe Zugen Azer is Mashiach." Soon the Lubavitcher was going to say that he's Mashiach. So there was a Yid, fine Yid, must have been a Choshev Yid, who was a Mechutin of the Belzer Rebbe, and he said, "Ich bin am Mechutin from the Belzer Rebbe." Aber der Lubavitcher Rebbe ist ein ganzer feiner Mashiach von mir. Lubavitcher Rebbe is ganz a feiner Mashiach from me, I was taking then. I also just want to add, we're running out of time. Yeah, Mashiach should have been here, Bizgalos. At that time, we brought down Emmanuel Shachatol of Shalom to give lectures about the Yoni Mashiach Geulah. And there was one, he was on a radio interview. Somebody made a sort of like a debate between him and the Reform Rabbi, the senior Reform Rabbi, and the presenter of the radio station, Yeshua, there's a Yid, but he always a sworn atheist. Anyway, so this is 1991 on Aleph, and this Reform Rabbi, so Rabbi Shachat, took care of him, with all of his quotes from the Talmud, which surely you're familiar with the Talmud about Mashiach. And then this Reform Rabbi had brought a piece of news from the Australian Jewish News from 1943 or 1944 that the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Friedrich Rebbe is calling for, imminent revelation of Mashiach. He wanted to say, look, it's 1991, it's 1943. So this radio presenter, right, who's an atheist, he cut him off. He says, that's not a fair comment. If you believe in Messiah, you believe he's coming imminently.
Wow.
Right? Then he's told about a certain group in Sydney that they have already built that. But he cut him off. Rabbi Shach didn't have to say anything. If you believe in Mashiach, you believe in it, you believe he's coming in. Anyway, the Ike is that we should be Zoiche to the Vayakhel Moshe and the koyach that we have from Moshe, and the Rebbe gesagt, that's Al Saved B'koyach Atzmai. Also when this whole man that we're in, we have the Sicha from the Rebbe, which is a Chelik Chof, the Kutte Sichas wegen Bikish Yaakov Legalis Aketz, which there, if you look there in Siv Zayin, a very, very stark word, which Lechair has got to do with this man now, right? The Rebbe speaks there about what was Yaakov Avinu's Svara and the Eibishter will sein Bishleims, but there it says, you can understand a bit, the Rebbe said after Yud Shvat Tavshin Yud, that's an Nesoin, was mit gedacht haben von Mashiach. So you're going to look in Nesyonis. The Eibishter should take away all our Nesyonis, we sein in great, and being that we're sitting here in Melbourne, Australia, I just want to make mention that the Rebbe said the two Rebbes and Garelik from Milano. My father and Gershom Mendel, Aleim HaShalom, were shluchim who left New York. They were the first ones who left New York, by the way. And he was always very adamant about it, Gershom Mendel of HaShalom. Around Yutas Kislev Tafshin Yutes, Gershom Mendel and his wife went before, my father went after. When Rebbes and Garelik was by the Rebbe, sometime, I don't know when, by herself, and I checked it with her a few times. She had already said it right after Geshem Mendel's Levai, when she in the Shalim, she told it. The Rebbe said to Mashiach to come in other free in Melbourne, other free in Milan.
But you know that the Rebbe said something else later.
I know that was somebody was going to Sydney.
That's Rabbi Feldman.
Yeah, going to Sydney.
But you know the interesting. Do you know when that was?
No.
Okay, so that was. I think it was.
When you were in Sydney?
No. I think it was Chav Zayin. I think the date's Chav Zayin 7, Tov Shin Nun Aleph. It was to Rabbi Feldman.
Yeah,
I saw Feldman Senior, and the Rebbe, he said that.
Mendel Feldman was
sagt, als der Mashiach het kommen in Australië früher. Der Rebbe sagt, wer sagt? Und da sagt man, als der Mashiach kommen da früher.
I think
that there's a sign wie Sim Paskan do. I think that's what the Rebbe said, if I remember correctly. But the word is that the very next day, Chav Ches 7, Tov Shin Nun Aleph, the very next day is a Sicha where the Rebbe speaks about as Beis Hamikdash Harab and Beis Rabbeinu Shem Bavel, that it's going to come down over here. It's unbelievable. And so solche sein, as the Rebbe finishes this Sicha, the Eibishter soll ton sein Tzedakah. We machen the Kol Godel Yeshua.
Kol Godel, that's something, it's years ago I said, wow, the last words of the Sicha that we have, Le'esat, that the Rebbe finished was Kol Godel Yeshua Heino.
Amen.
And so McCoy van Vayakhel Moshe.
Amen.
Kol Tov.